Hello, welcome back to the Waffle Press podcast. I'm your host, Diego Crespo. With me today is Gina Versa, my co-host on the regular Waffle Press movie podcast. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Alert
And to,
and awake.
yes, and today we're talking about something a little different. We talked about it before in the show, and we've like talking about these things off air too. Gene and I are big kaiju fans. A discussion a couple months ago led us to creating this show where it's all specifically about kaiju movies and the history of kaiju movies. And we wanted to do this where we talk about an older kaiju movie and a kaiju movie that was coming out in theaters. So, needless to say, this will not be a regular show. We're going to try to do it once a month with an older kaiju, a classic kaiju film, and a more recent kaiju film
Right.
as we get ready for stuff like Godzilla versus Kong. Initially, we kind of wanted to structure this around Pacific Rim Uprising, but that didn't happen. But that's okay because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has a new movie called Rampage coming out. But before we get to that, Gene, let's talk a little bit about our history with kaiju movies with you. What's your history with the genre?
Well, when I was about 4 or 5, I had one of my parents, I think it was my dad, rent from Blockbuster King Kong. It was the 30s Kong, and I didn't quite like it, to be honest. I didn't feel sorry for Kong at all, for some apparent reason. And I liked the dinosaurs in it, but Kong just wasn't doing for me. So he was like, "Oh, okay. Have let me rent another movie," and it was Godzilla, which was Godzilla King of the Monsters, the English dub. I fell in love with that film, even with Raymond Burr shoehorned into the film. And it was funny. The thing with Godzilla, I just loved his design when I was a kid. His personality as a monster, I fell in love with because he's very unapologetic, whereas Kong is somewhat sympathetic. And I actually felt more compassion towards Godzilla dying than Kong, actually, when I was younger watching it.
That's still so weird to me, but go on.
I was just blown away by the whole film, and I started watching all the other Godzilla films. So Godzilla versus Mothra, and I loved all of them, even though they all change in tone and the types of films. So I fell in love with those monsters.
Yeah, I started with Godzilla. I don't remember which one. I remember having all the VHS box sets of like the American imports of all of them, and I was really into those, like super into all the Godzilla stuff. I remember really liking Mothra actually
Mothra,
though.
yeah, Mothra is a good monster because she's the only one that's well, she could defeat Godzilla.
Only one that's not a dick.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And her like her lore is so weird,
Hmm.
like with the tiny women and
Yeah.
everything. Like it's so bizarre, and like honestly, a lot of these are pretty bizarre in a good way. Just like that Mothra specifically is so like out there,
Hmm.
you know. And this is a franchise that will eventually spawn Space Godzilla.
Hmm.
So I mean, if that's
Yes.
like not the weirdest thing, then today we're here to talk about Rampage. And first, because we want to talk about classic kaiju films, while we're talking about the new ones too, to highlight the entirety of the genre. Gene, I asked you what you'd want to watch for this first episode, and you brought up War of the Gargantuas.
Attention! All aircraft are to turn away! An alert! An alert! This is Tokyo Tower! Don't land!
Well, I chose this one because War of the Gargantuans has one of the few, like Mothra, hero monsters in it with Sandra, I believe his name is, where he's a good kaiju that, he works against the other monster, which is his brother, to try to stop his rampage. And he reminded me of George, where in Rampage, George is, well, towards the end, goes against the other monsters. So that's why I chose it.
I guess I should give you my thoughts on it
Sure.
because you recommended it, and I really liked it.
Hmm.
Even though I think Russ Tamblyn, the American actor, is not
Oh, yeah.
good in this.
Right.
But
No,
like
he's not.
whatever. I could sit through the American 50s Godzilla. I could sit through this. But I'll tell you what I really liked. The monster battles. There was like, even for back then, you can't
Mhm.
get like the huge sense of scale that you can nowadays, just given like technical efficiency and whatnot. But the use of miniatures was really incredible to me. Like there's this helicopter chase sequence. I was
Mhm.
like, wow, this looks really good. Like you really feel it for a movie that was made in the
Yes.
1960s. The director Ishiro Honda, he
Mhm.
really conveys like a sense of like hugeness and like it really feels like
Does
you're
that.
watching monsters clash, not like men in suits, and that
Mhm.
was really cool. I didn't
Yeah,
expect that from this one.
has a good um has a good level of scale.
Yeah, or the airport sequence, that was really cool to me. But I
Mhm.
think what caught me off guard the most in the beginning was when, because I had no idea what this was about. You were just like, watch it, like, okay, I'll rent it. So I watched it on YouTube, where you can rent it for $3.99,
Yes.
and I started with the octopus attacking the ship, and I was like,
Yes.
oh, okay. Like I guess I'm not gonna get the weird designs I was kind of hoping for with this,
Mhm.
and then they twist it, and it's the octopus gets killed by Gyra, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing here. That's cool, and really good practical effects work too with the tentacles. That was
Yeah.
really impressive to me, like how naturally they moved and everything like that. They didn't feel like they were being tugged on by strings. Like at
Mhm.
some point, we're going to talk about Godzilla versus Kong, and oh
Right.
boy.
The giant octopus is a recurring character in the Toho films. He is, I believe he has a name, that octopus, but he comes back in Godzilla versus King Kong. King Kong fights him. He is used on the Godzilla TV show a few times, not the animated one. There was a 60s one. And he's just kind of this throwaway monster that Toho often uses to just show the ferocity of their monsters. So he's kind of their punching bag, if you will.
He's our Kenny.
Yeah, yeah, he could be. Yeah, he could be like that.
Oh, he's
He's
even orange like Kenny.
yeah, he's their yeah, he's their Kenny. So they often just throw that character in scenes to just mess with them.
I like that though, because then like it shows you like it's a really quick way to convey to the audience like, oh yeah, here's a big monster that we're familiar with because it's an octopus, and here's a bigger, scarier thing that's gonna immediately take him out of the food chain. But what do you think of War of the Gargantuas? I mean, you recommended it.
Yes,
You're a fan?
yes, I'm a big fan of it. I believe it was recommended on Twitter by Guillermo del Toro, and it was on Hulu. It wasn't a film I saw growing up, but it was on Hulu maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'll check it out. And yeah, I was really impressed by it. It is one of Ishiro Honda's better later Toho films. I believe this is one of his last. His contract was actually going up around when they were filming, I believe. I could be wrong, but and in his later films, because I love him as a director, he is so well. He does so well at making monster movies, but he gets like I don't know. The later couple of Godzilla films, they have like some issues with tone. They get a little too goofy, and I still like that, but there are times where it's like Godzilla's making like a victory dance or something. Like it's a little like I mean it's fun when you're a kid, but
I love my goofy stuff, but I think there's like there still has to be a tonal balance,
yeah,
and like Godzilla doing the jumping jacks or
I,
whatever
I
is
love that. Yeah, I love that as a GIF, but it doesn't quite work for me.
yeah, like I'm glad it exists, but it does kind of take you out of it. It comes to that point like how there's complaints about like blockbuster saturation and like well like everyone's kind of in on the joke or whatever,
Yeah.
and that feels like one of the origins of that, like the first big instances of that.
hmm Yeah. No, 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 for sure. But yeah, this film he handles the tone really well. It harkens back to kind of some of the first couple Toho films where there isn't. I mean, there's some camp to it, but it's played straight for the most part. Would you say?
Yeah, yeah. I think these things kind of are almost inherently campy, not in
Mhm.
a negative way. I think
No, no.
camp has
Very,
odd connotations to it
how
nowadays, where
about
it's like kind
Blocky?
of tongue in cheek. Yeah, I think people kind of mix it up with like schlocky, and this is it's almost inherently silly, but it is played serious enough because there's an interesting story here, of which I did not know that this was technically a sequel.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I was going to say the history of that. It's technically a sequel to the Toho Frankenstein, Frankenstein versus the World, but it's not really stated in the dub. It's just kind of implied, I guess. Where, well, I'll just do a little history. The original titles were the Frankenstein brothers, then the Two Frankenstein, then Frankenstein versus Frankenstein, Frankenstein's fight during the scripting process, and they were the two monsters in this film. They're spawned from the discarded cells of Frankenstein's monster from the previous film. So it's a Frankenstein movie in a way, the Toho Frankenstein.
That's amazing. I want every franchise to do that. Like have weird unofficial rip-off sequels. That's so cool and so weird, and that would never happen today.
Yeah, 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 it's a Toho thing. Yeah, so technically it is a sequel to that film. You don't need to see it. I've never seen Frankenstein versus the World, but I'm sure it has its moments.
If it's as good as this, do you know if Ishiro Honda directed that too?
I don't believe he did. I can check right now. But he is, he did mostly all the Toho films. Oh, actually, he did. Yes, yeah, he did do that one. So yeah, he does most of the monster films for Toho, like King Kong and everything. So
No, we'll have to check that one out sometime too.
another thing of tidbit is this is the second Toho film to have an American actor that you were talking about with Russ Tamblyn, because Raymond Burr is in Godzilla King of the Monsters. I don't believe Toho commissioned Raymond Burr to be in it. That was the American distributor, but it is technically the second film. And Ishiro Hondo did not like Russ Tamblyn a lot. He called him, he said he was, there's someone, I believe one of his aides or something said he was such an asshole. And he improvised a lot of his lines because he thought the dialogue was bad, Russ Tamblyn. So he did not get along. At least Raymond Burr brings something to Godzilla King of the Monsters, to the dub. I prefer the Japanese version, but he brings a lot to that film, even though he's very shoehorned in it. So he does a lot better job than Russ Tamblyn, I will say.
Yeah, Russ Tamblyn's not very good in this.
No.
Like everyone else feels very committed to this, and every time he talks, he just feels like he's sighing. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
really talk; he sighs his dialogue out, and he just looks so grumpy and like involved. And that's a huge bummer because I was actually really getting into this movie, and every time it comes back to his character, Doctor Stewart, Doctor Paul, what's his?
Yes.
He sucks the life out of it for me.
Mhm.
And I won't even blame the rest of the movie on that, because the rest
Right.
of it had me like so like into the big monster stuff, and like the brawls and the investigation basically that everyone's trying to do. Like, oh, is this your monster? Is it another monster? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, he should not have been in it, and he does take away a lot from the film, unfortunately. Do you feel like his role was even needed?
No,
No?
no, I is because he's. I mean, clearly he's not in the first one, then, right? If he,
No.
yeah.
He's a new character.
So like, no, you could. I think you had enough going on with the Japanese scientists already trying to like discuss and like discover the creatures and like their relationships eventually, right?
Right.
And I don't know. Yeah, I don't think you needed him for this, but we won't get too deep into spoilers for this because this is the classic recommendation, and we assume a lot of you haven't watched it.
So go see it.
Still definitely go see it. But I want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the themes of the movie before we move on to Rampage
Mhm.
officially. So with kaiju movies, there's always has to be like some social relevance, or at least like I think the better kaiju films have that testament to them.
Mhm.
Like they're about a little something more, about some social anxiety of sorts. Godzilla's about the atomic age. King Kong's about slavery. Uh, what is War of the Gargantuas about, in your opinion?
My opinion? Well, it seems like it's about pacifism. I feel with Sandra's character, where he's kind of Iron Giant in a way, where he's very to himself. He tries not to attack people. I got a little bit of that. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say it's about pacifism and like there's all these classic movie lines about how like like a great like warrior doesn't go out seeking war, but
Hmm.
they must always be ready for it. That's a quote from Thor, and it's a very
Thor.
good quote.
Mhm.
But I think that is relevant here, where Sandra doesn't want to fight. Like towards the finale, he's like trying to like calm his brother. It seems like
Mhm.
but they can't. That's not their relationship, so he can't stop the brother. And so then War of the Gargantuas fight, boom, bow, pow. And that was interesting. I didn't think it had that much more meat on its bones, but I'd be willing to be like swayed otherwise. I haven't actually done that much more research in the film besides of what I watched and the production notes that we already talked about. But
Yes.
yeah, it's a quality little movie, and all kaiju fans should check it out. Also, the design of Gyra is scary to me. It reminds me of the Gremlin from Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but with the skin and his like scales and fur, I could see that.
Yeah, and when he's coming out of the water, it's that would scare me as a kid. I feel
Mhm.
like that's a scary looking
Yeah.
dude.
I think when Godzilla first comes out of the water, that scared me. When you're a kid, it's more susceptible to striking imagery like that.
And there's lots of striking imagery in this. The monster brawls are very good. There's a cool little not even like a mystery plot. You basically know what's going to happen, but it's fun to watch the scientist characters try to figure out what's going on and like kind of maintain like the situation from the political aspect a little bit in like the middle act. Just ignore Russ Tamblyn, and honestly, I think you'll have a great time.
Let him have it. Hey, look! Another one!
Moving on, next section in Talk All Monsters is on Rampage, The Rock's new blockbuster debut and #1 everywhere, basically, except for like some places where The Quiet Place is still winning out. Not a kaiju movie, but a very good movie, so you should watch The Quiet Place.
See that as well.
Yeah. And Rampage is a blast. It's based on the video game of the same name from the 1980s, 1990s.
Yeah, 90s. Yeah.
90s, yeah.
Did you play it?
I'd never played Rampage. I have no affinity for Rampage other than this movie.
It was a fun game. You just break stuff. They actually revived it in some of the Dave and Buster's, the arcade game, but it's updated with the new characters, and that's why you have a product placement shot of Dave and Buster's in the movie.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I played it as a youngster. It was quite fun. It was very button mashy. It's spawned a few sequels. I didn't play the sequels, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of iconic, I guess, for me. I had some nostalgia for it.
And that's cool because I mean, for so many video games, it's always like, what do you adapt? What do you leave out? And then a lot of video game movies, I feel like, tend to struggle between the two and then end up kind of becoming nothings of movies.
Mhm.
I like plenty of video game movies, and I think some are even pretty dang good. But it's a problem. A lot of them come up.
And this is technically a video game film.
Yeah.
As long as being monsters, right?
Yeah, and I think Rampage, it covers both grounds, video game movie and a kaiju movie. Rampage benefits in that there is no story to adapt. It is just the monsters you're taking, and you make them into like a giant disaster movie.
You got another one of your little science experiments running around.
What do you mean another one?
Of course, the wolf flies.
Stop me, oh, somebody stop me, stop me, please, somebody stop me, oh.
What did you think of Rampage, Gene?
I liked it. I said on Twitter, it's a schlocky B movie with tons of flaws, but I enjoyed it. It is not perfect by any means, but if you want to see monsters fight one another, it's the movie for you. I did feel some of it got not too schlocky, but it got too cheesy, even for me, because I work on a lot of B movies. There's just one or two times where it's just a little too much, Like it's like calm down there, The Rock.
I don't think it can calm down, and I don't know if I want him to. Well, just a quick synopsis: Rampage is about monsters going on rampage, but first they're accidentally created by a shady company conspiracy thing, and the villains. I love the villains in this because they're basically Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I would say, yeah, a little bit of Donald Trump Jr. Maybe like Eric Trump Jr. Eric Trump, where he's really stupid. Well, I mean, they're both pretty stupid, but yeah, I could definitely see that. I wonder if Malin Ackerman based her performance on that.
They're like really good at showing scenery in this.
Yeah, they were. They're very animated. Excuse me. They're kind of like cartoon villains, I would say.
Yeah, perfect for our times where we have cartoon villains in the White House. So
Yeah.
I think if kaiju movies have to represent or end up representing the time that they take place and like when they're made, Rampage struck a lot of chords with me that I did not expect.
Right. I found it oddly relevant, especially with the use of because a lot of monster movies, they involve the atomic bomb, and that was a fear. But this one, it wasn't they were going to nuke the city. Getting a little bit of spoilers, but they were going to use the Moab, which has been very active in military use recently. I found that very oddly relevant.
The monsters are man-made. They tried to do this, and that some poor civilians just get caught in the midst of it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I should go on record as saying I didn't like San Andreas. That is the director and Dwayne Johnson's previous team-up movie. I thought it was a total misfire and misuse of The Rock's talents. And here he's so good, and like he has this great relationship with this monkey George that I really bought into. But I also think what didn't work in San Andreas was that it felt very mean-spirited. And here with a kaiju movie, I think you can get a little harsher.
Yeah, I did feel it was. I did feel it was a little too mean-spirited, though. I felt some of the kills remind me of the Colin Trevorrow deaths in Jurassic World a little bit. How some of the characters meet their ends.
Like I don't know about that level, but I think Brad Payton is a better director, so he kind of like the way it's structured here, and in Jurassic Park, I should say, the dinosaurs are like they're not inherently like monstrous. The whole like series is precipitated on like this idea that they're just animals loose in our world, and we did this, and it's a tragedy. But now we're stuck with them here, and we have to like take care of them. But Jurassic World doesn't understand that and just wants all dinosaurs to be monsters until the very end, where they're like, "Oh, blue." And it's like, what the fuck? This is a total 180 of what we're just watching. What happened?
Yeah.
And then in Rampage, it's like, oh no, they're just fucking crazy. They turned into crazy monsters because of this evil company, and everyone's suffering the price except for the evil company until the end. So it works for me here in a way that it doesn't work in Jurassic Park, strictly because of context.
Okay. Well, I agree to that. It's just some of the monster kills were kind of. I just felt it was a little too much. I'll just say that.
I can see that for sure. I like the baby predator sequence with Joe Manganiello, the leader of the private military group.
Yeah, that was cool. I was very surprised he was only in for one scene.
Yeah, I guess I was watching a little snippet with Brad Payton. He was like, I think it was like THR or someone he was talking to, and he was saying how much he loved Predator. And so when he was setting up that sequence, he's like, "Oh my god, I finally get to do Predator." Like just this like 5-10 minute sequence is my Predator. And so when they went to go talk to Joe Manganiello about the role, he was like, "Hey, do you like Predator?" He was like, "Oh, I love Predator, man." And so then like they pitched the scene to him like that was his Predator too. And so they just had like this fun little sequence in the woods that ultimately you don't really need in the movie. Like I guess if you want to set up that the monsters are like super dangerous now, that's kind of the one they do it with, right? But I guess you don't really need it, but it was kind of awesome anyways, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I like him as an actor. Is the only thing. I wish I got to see more of him in the film. But yeah, it was a cool sequence. I guess it was his cameo.
Yeah, well, you know what? He's Deathstroke in the DC movies, so I'm sure we'll see him again in like 2 years or 5 or however long it takes him to figure out what to do there.
Yeah.
Naomi Harris, I think, is kind of wasted in this.
Yeah, she was a vet where she was just kind of, she's Moneypenny, and she doesn't really do too much in this film except, I'm going to say exposition. And she's kind of love interest, I guess.
I think it's an unfortunate circumstance of American blockbusters where they don't like if they're not the lead or the romance, they're like, well, where do we put the women in movies? What else can they do? Like people just can't wrap their head around like anything involving like women in active roles in movies unless they're like the love interest or the lead. Like they don't really consider putting them in other like surrounding them in other roles in the movie, and so I think that's an unfortunate thing there.
Yeah,
but Naomi Harris is wonderful, and I sincerely hope they bring her back for Bond 25 too.
Yeah, I hope so. She's good enough.
I mean, like she just got off of Moonlight like a year ago, right?
Yeah,
and like she's so good in that, and then she's in Rampage, and it's like that's not that she's in Rampage is a bad thing. It's just that she has nothing to do, and that's a disappointment. Yeah, and you and I disagreed on Jeffrey Dean Morgan earlier because do you want to air your grievances with that character he plays?
I felt he was almost in another film. I don't know. He was just kind of he was there, and then he was like an antagonist, and then like they kind of win him over, and then he's just kind of being Nick Fury. I didn't see the point of his character.
I like his character, but like a lot of the stuff in this movie, it doesn't really need to be there. Like the wolf, like I mentioned, the wolf attack doesn't really need to be there in that part of the movie. You just want a cool action sequence in the woods. But I liked the way you shot the action sequence, and I liked the way that went about. Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character is kind of the same for me. Where like, yeah, you don't really need him, but I liked having him around. And like, if you look at him like throughout the movie, like you brought up a good point. Like, yeah, he's like antagonistic at first, and then kind of don't know whose side he's gonna end up on, and then like, oh, he's a good guy helping him out, and then the Nick Fury thing is hilarious. That's perfect. But then he has lines like, "I'm the guy you call when science shits the bed," and it's like, what planet are you on? This is amazing. Like, I wouldn't watch a movie about him or anything, but I kind of want this guy to pop up in every movie ever made now. Yeah, like it's a total cartoon, and I think for some of the tonal issues that this movie might have, it could be attributed to him, but also I wouldn't want it without him because Jeffrey Dean Morgan's so good at like everything in life, and like, he's kind of that perfect amount of smarmy and suave and like kind of like manly man. So it's it won me over, but I totally am not going to discredit you for feeling the way you do about him.
I wanted to like him.
Won't go too far into the big old spoiler stuff, I guess, because this is a new release. But what did you think of the monster designs? I mean, they're kind of similar to the way they are in the games, but like how they looked on screen. Did you buy into them?
I actually like their monster design. The Crocodile Lizzie, especially liked, and Ralph. I don't know why his name's Ralph in the movie. They just randomly name him Ralph. I guess he looks like Ralph. He was I liked his just the thick, how his his fur gets all thick and spiky, and he randomly has wings because why not? So yeah, I enjoyed them. George was cool too, just kind of a King Kong ape. But yeah, very top notch monster designs.
Yeah, I think the some more criticisms I got to toss the movie's way because I ended up liking this a lot more than I thought I would, and I just wish it could have been even better. I'm always gonna have to knock blockbusters that look a little flat with like their mega $100 million budgets.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a negative side of shooting digital. If you don't shoot for the way you're gonna shoot digital, or like the color correct, or just add like some different environments to city destruction,
Mm-hmm.
like it's gonna come across like it is overly gray. Everything's gonna be in your face, gray and dust, and it's gonna look a little flat, and that's kind of a bummer because
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, Pacific Rim, the last three like main big blockbuster movies that were kaiju movies, all looked great regardless of what people thought of each one of those, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a bummer that Rampage doesn't look nearly as good as them. I wish that The Rock was able to be a little bit more antisocial in this. Like they kind of try to play it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like he doesn't really like people. He just likes animals.
People.
But he's so nice to everyone.
He's so nice. He's chatty. He kind of plays against type, but it doesn't quite work that way in context of the scenes.
Yeah. He's great, and we've seen him be kind of a dick before. Like his opening line in Fast 5 is like just a rundown of all the stuff he needs to get done, and then it ends with "and stay the fuck out of my way." And it's so badass. Like obviously that's a totally different character from what he's playing in this movie, but like I think he needed to just be like a little like less open to people. And then like if you could even play it like by the end of it, he's like, "See, this is what happens with fucking people," you know?
Right.
Like, because people
that
ultimately
could have been his arc.
if you just want to play it that way, you know? Other than that, I really liked Rampage. And for your kaiju bucks, I would say you will also probably like Rampage.
It's not an Academy Award-winning film by any means, but it's a solid monster movie.
I'm glad The Rock is making weird-ass movies that no one else would fund. Gene, any final thoughts on either of the movies we mentioned today?
I had some faults with Rampage. I point out some stuff, but I would recommend it. It really gets the kind of the beauty of these monsters, especially George. He kind of reminds me of Kong or Godzilla, where even though they cause destruction, there's some kind of elegance to them. I guess this goes back to why I enjoyed Godzilla so much as opposed to Kong, is that there's a beauty in these creatures. They are unlike anything that walk the earth in their films, and I feel with its treatment of George, it really captures that. So even if it, is not the best, sometimes, at least Rampage understands that.
Yeah, George is the beating heart of this movie. And I think, if anything, I would have liked to have seen the movie deal with the fact that George did, do a lot of bad things under the influence of this medical super drug thing.
Yeah.
And but I guess, how do you kind of like confront that in a movie that's like under 2 hours and it's about monsters beating the shit out of each other?
Of course.
So
yeah,
I don't know. I liked it, and but I still wish they had tightened some things up here and there. Nothing wrong with that. Gene, thank you again for doing this with me. Thanks for being my co-host. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, of course, it was a good talk with you about monsters we both love. You could find me on Twitter, Instagram, G9892. I'm always posting crazy tweets.
And you can find me on Twitter at DEWGO Waffles. The Waffle Press on Twitter. Like and subscribe if you didn't like this. Like and subscribe anyways, because you might find something you do like. And stay tuned. Every month I'll be doing these Talk All Monster discussions. So happy to be starting this finally. And we will let you know when the next episode's coming around, because I think we got plenty of monster stuff to talk about. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional.
George, you okay? Ready to do this, buddy?